In 18th century France, a scandal was brewing at the king's court in Versailles. Louis XV had an affair with not one, not two, not three, but four of the D'Mailly sisters. It was even rumored that the sisters had been involved in steamy group sex with several of the women.
One of the sisters, the Duchesse de Châteauroux, would ask her other sister to come along and give matters a helping hand occasionally.
The idea of marital fidelity was seen as laughable.
The sudden and mysterious death of two of them sparked even more furor, with evil lips at the court whispering that they had been murdered. In the glittering halls of Versailles, where power, intrigue, and desire intertwined, few stories are as captivating, or as scandalous, as that of the D'Mailly sisters. Born into nobility, 4 out of 5 sisters would go on to captivate the heart of King Louis XV, changing the course of French history and leaving a legacy shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Louise, Pauline, Diane, and Marie-Anne, each with their own ambitions, secrets, and influence, would become the talk of the court. Their lives marked by love, rivalry, and tragedy would shake the very foundations of the French monarchy. With one of them, to the shock and horror of the nobles, convinced the king to go to war against Austria-Hungary, something that would ultimately lead to the marriage between the king's son and Marie Antoinette. And we all know how that went. From the glittering salons of Versailles to the dark undercurrents of court intrigue, their tale is one of ambition, scandal, and the price of power in a world where love and loyalty were often the most dangerous games of all. This is History with Magnus. But before we begin, please do the subscribe thing and blah, blah, blah. The D'Mailly Nestlé family, steeped in the opulence of 18th century French aristocracy, was a prominent player in the intricate dance of Versailles' high society. As holders of the distinguished title of Marquis of Nestlé, their lineage afforded them unparalleled access to the upper echelons of French nobility. At the heart of this influential family was Louis D'Mailly and his wife, Armande Felice de la Porte Mazarin. Their impeccable connections at court opened doors for their daughters to mingle with the crème de la crème of European aristocracy. In the dazzling world of Versailles, noble families showcased their daughters to the king with hopes of capturing his gaze. The nobles would parade their daughters in front of the king in Versailles, hoping that they would capture the monarch's eye, becoming a lover, or even better, an official mistress, elevating their family status and influence to the pinnacle of power.
Louis began a life of carnal adventures that would turn him into one of history's greatest libertines.
He was a great womanizer, but there was nothing unusual about that. French kings were expected to be womanizers. This was seen as a sign that they were virile and were going to produce an heir and were in fact acting in an aristocratic and masculine way.
It was within this environment of privilege and expectation that the 5 D'Mailly sisters were raised. These sisters were not just born into wealth and title. They were also endowed with beauty, charm, and intelligence. The first of the sisters to enter this world was Louise Julie D'Mailly Nestlé, the eldest of the 5. Initially brought to court as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Marie, Louise Julie's demure charm quickly caught the eye of the king. The young king was enchanted by her charm, and it wasn't long before she became his mistress, a position that granted her considerable influence, though she wielded it with a surprisingly modest hand. Unlike the later and much more famous mistress, Madame de Pompadour, she didn't participate in any other way than being a hot mistress for the king's pleasure. But what she did do was open the court and the king for her other sisters, setting in motion a series of events that would entwine the entire D'Mailly family with the king.
Eh bien, ma sœur m'assaille de lettres depuis quelques mois, et elle ne rêve que d'une chose, me dit-elle, être ici, à Versailles.
She persuaded the king to invite her sister to court, and following in Louise Julie's footsteps, Pauline arrived at Versailles with a determination that belied her delicate appearance.
Elle est juste à côté.
Eh bien, faites-la entrer.
Ma sœur?
Il ne faudrait pas que proche du roi, elle n'y gagne qu'un vilain refroidissement.
It was rumoured that one of the sisters, the Duchesse de Châteauroux, would ask her other sister to come along and give matters a helping hand occasionally.
More ambitious than her elder sister, Pauline wasted no time in capturing the king's attention. Her arrival at court in 1739, while her sister still held the official title of official mistress, would shake up the intrigues at court even more.
Viens, ne prends pas froid.
Spoiler alert. Inviting your younger, hotter sister for a threesome isn't a good idea.
In some senses, it was a scandal, but I think people thought it was funny rather than disgraceful.
Her entry was marked by a whirlwind romance with the king, and she soon supplanted her sister in his affections. She was known for being witty, lively, and more daring than her older sister, which may have contributed to her rapid rise in the king's favor. Pauline bore the king a son in 1741, who was named Louis de Vintimille. Although the child was not officially acknowledged by the king, it was widely understood that he was the king's son. Pauline's influence at court grew quickly during her affair with Louis, but her time as his mistress was cut short by her sudden death on September 9, 1741, shortly after giving birth. It is believed that Pauline died from complications related to childbirth, but it was rumored at Versailles that her death might have been caused by other factors, possibly even poison, though there is no substantial evidence to support this. Pauline's death left a significant impact on the king, who was reportedly devastated by her loss. After Pauline's death, her younger sister, Marie-Anne, eventually took her place as the king's mistress, becoming one of the most powerful and influential women in Louis's life. Marie-Anne was the youngest of the sisters, and she was known for her striking beauty, ambition, and sharp intelligence. Unlike her older sisters, she was determined to secure a position of power and influence at court. She strategically positioned herself to become the king's next mistress, and by 1742, she had successfully won the king's favor, replacing her sister Louise Julie as the king's official mistress. Marie-Anne's affair with the king became one of the most significant relationships of the king's life. Unlike her sisters, Marie-Anne was not content to simply be the king's lover. She sought to wield real political power. She encouraged Louis to assert his authority more forcefully, particularly in matters of foreign policy. Her influence was so strong that she played a key role in persuading the king to enter the War of the Austrian Succession on the side of Prussia and Spain against Austria and Great Britain. Marie-Anne's involvement in political affairs, coupled with her ambition, made her a controversial figure at court. She was both admired and resented by many, including members of the nobility and ministers who were wary of her growing power.
And so did his decision to lead his armies in person, accompanied, of course, by two of the Denel sisters. But war was to bring Louis his first brush with death.
Marie-Anne's dominance at court did not last long, though, because in 1744, while accompanying the king on a military campaign in Metz, the king fell seriously ill.
While he was at Metz, he fell terribly ill, and it was considered that he was going to die.
Louis didn't think much of his marriage vows, but like most people of his age, he did believe in heaven and hell. And he knew which one he wanted to avoid.
La Sainte Église ne peut donner les sacrements à votre Majesté, dès lors que sa maîtresse est à ses côtés.
Sauvez mon âme, Monseigneur.
Fearing for his life, and perhaps seeking to make amends for his numerous extramarital affairs, the king distanced himself from Marie-Anne and ordered her to leave the court.
Sa Majesté me charge de vous dire qu'elle se repent du mal qu'elle a pu commettre et promet de consacrer le reste de ses heures au bien de ses sujets.
The mistresses were sent away, but they refused to go completely. They hung around in the town of Metz until the bishops were obliged to send a message saying that our Lord wasn't really going to wait upon their pleasure, and would they please get out.
The king's illness turned out to be less severe than initially feared, and he recovered, and soon after he was back at his many affairs, completely forgetting his vows to the bishop a few days earlier. However, Marie-Anne was not allowed to return to court, and she died suddenly in 1744, at the age of only 27, under circumstances that again led to much speculations. Some accounts suggest she may have died of a fever, while others hint at the possibility of poisoning, though again, there is no definitive evidence to support this. The fourth and last sister to be involved with the French king was Diane. The exact timing of her affair is not well documented, but it likely took place sometime shortly after the death of her sister in 1744. For a short time, the king consoled himself with her, but unlike her three sisters, Diane never held the title of official mistress, and her relationship with the king was more of a fleeting dalliance than a significant affair. By the time Diane became involved with Louis, the king was already growing weary of the de Mailly-Nesle family's influence at court, and her affair with Louis was brief, and she did not achieve the same level of power or influence as her sister Marie-Anne. Because a few months later, the king had already cast his eyes on a new woman, Madame de Pompadour, who would become Louis XV's most famous mistress. After Diane's brief affair with the king, she returned to her marriage and led a relatively quiet life compared to the drama that surrounded her sisters. The last sister, Hortense Félicité, also found her way to Versailles, though she was never involved with the king. Marie-Anne de Mailly's affair with Louis left a lasting impact on the French court and the king's reign. She was one of the few mistresses in French history who managed to wield real political influence, and her ambition and assertiveness set her apart from her sisters and other royal mistresses of the time. Yet beneath the layers of silk and the sparkle of jewels, the story of the de Mailly sisters is a poignant reminder of the fragile line between love and power, and the cost of living within the orbit of a throne. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to dive deeper into history's most fascinating figures.